Shall I just say a quick hello to everybody, and then I'll head off and let you do the Q&A for Simon. But it's lovely to see you here, and I hope you have a wonderful evening with the questions and answers, and lots of love to Germany CC. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. Oh. Nice that you popped in as well. So, hi, Simon. A very, very warm welcome to our Zoom. Thank you very much for taking the time for this Q&A today. We are all dressed up nicely for this special occasion, I think.
Yes.
Thank you.
We are really lucky to have the chance to ask our questions to you, because not only that you have such an incredible knowledge about so many topics from your family backgrounds, most of us know you have quite a special relationship to the German history and what was happening in Germany, especially after or during the World Wars. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank my regional coordinators who collected the questions beforehand and helped me to summarize the topics in sort of cluster questions. And we would like to read out those questions, and some of the coordinators had the time tonight to be with us, and we will take turn in asking the questions, so you will hear different voices. And if you don't mind, we'll read all the clusters out first and then just go through them step by step, so you wouldn't have to keep them all in mind. But
that's fine, Karen. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so I will start with the first question, and then we just take turns for the coordinators. And for the audience, this will be all in English tonight, but we will, as you've seen, we will record this Q&A and we will provide a translation afterwards. So enjoy the time with us, and welcome everybody who's with us tonight. Lovely to see you all. Okay, so Simon, could you please elaborate on what you've mentioned about the Fourth Reich and the military activities in Austria and Germany?
When we think of the Second World War, we think of the picture that is given to us by the history books. And that history was that Germany lost the war. Well, Germany lost the war in terms of bombs and bullets, but it didn't actually lose the war in terms of the secret government that was transported from Germany to America and other countries. And I know there's a lot of talk about Antarctica, but at the moment we just talk about America. And so America really wanted all of the secrets that the Third Reich had been holding and developing, and America did not stand in the way of a small group of Germans and others forming the Fourth Reich, not because they wanted to bring Adolf Hitler back, but because the culture and the concepts and the values that they had created, they wished to maintain. And so they operated not in Germany, because Germany was going through a transition phase. They simply went to Austria. Austria was the home of Adolf Hitler, and it was not being investigated by the Allies, as was Germany proper. Austria, interestingly, sort of part under the Russian or the Soviet bloc, but also very westernized as well. And so the Fourth Reich, in terms of intelligences, money, was based there. And so it was very important that in order to take down what we call the deep state, they had to action in Austria. And that's what's happened. It's not armies, it's not tanks, it's just a handful of men who find the money for operations, who produce propaganda, who produce information to affect other governments. So that's what was dealt with in Austria, some what we call safe houses, some places where these individuals were hiding out. So that is why it happened in Austria and not in Germany. Okay.
Thank you for the answer. I'm Tina. I'm the regional coordinator from Berlin. And our question is looking at the Germans in a wider perspective, not only as a population of a state, but as a culture and a group with deep spiritual roots that has brought about poets like Rudolf Steiner thinks and speaks about. Our question is, the Germans didn't start World War I and II, and they are still under occupation. Why is there so much interest in destroying this country and the German culture? Who is afraid of us? Who wants to take advantage of the Germans? Who has an interest in a population decline and or economic reduction, as we are the cash cow for so many? So the first part of the question is, why is there so much interest in destroying this country in the German culture?
Thank you, Tina. The interest in destroying Germany and the culture is very recent, last 10 years. All of the history before that was not about destroying Germany. It was about using Germany to bring about world wars. And I agree with you. Germans did not start First World War and they did not start the Second World War. They were used just like every other country was used. The difficulty, I think, is that Germany, you do have a connection to the ocean, but it's very much surrounded by many other Central European countries or Eastern European countries. And so if you wanted to choose a country to start a war, then you would choose a country that was surrounded by other countries, because then a lot of politics can be played, such as immigration, such as refugees. And of course, if you look at the Second World War, many of the reasons given were for Germany to expand its borders. Now, why Germany? Remember that Great Britain is closer to Germany culturally than any other country on the earth. Great Britain is the only country that is not a Latin-speaking country. Our words largely come from Germanic connections, and I always make the joke that in Great Britain, if you go to a cinema or a theatre, it doesn't say usually exit, it says way out. So you think about Ostgang. So our words are almost a copy, because our peoples in Great Britain are largely composed of Germans. Literally between 400 AD and 700 AD, large numbers of Germans came and settled in Britain. So it's interesting that Britain and Germany have been at war twice officially when we are so very close, and it's because of manipulation. In the last 10 years, Germany has been systematically attacked because it's so powerful. Because, as you said, the people of Germans are not just warlike. British people are very warlike. German people basically destroyed the Roman Empire. Hundreds of thousands of German tribes crossed the Rhine and part of the Danube, and over maybe a 30-40 year period, they destroyed the Western Roman Empire, and it was Germans that destroyed the Latin Empire. So it's natural. The Celts, those in France and in Spain and in Britain at the time, couldn't defeat the Roman Empire, but the Germans did. And that's very important. And so anyone who studies history knows that the German people are very strong. So if you wanted to cause a war, you wouldn't start with a country necessarily like Italy or Spain that would probably fight for about 6 months and then give up. You would look for a country that was going to fight and fight and fight and fight. And so the poor people of Germany were manipulated by a whole range of elite people And I have studied very carefully the history of Adolf Hitler, and I don't mean the history that I can go into a bookshop and buy a book or online. I mean, I've spoken with people who, whilst they were not alive at the time, have had access to secret records. And the reality is that Hitler was manipulated by these very powerful individuals, and he was chosen to create this war. And had he not been chosen like that, he would have just have been another ordinary German. And so the interest has always been on a big country, because Germany is a very big geographical country. It has big, heavy industry, and it also has very beautiful rural lands, and it has a lot of neighbors. And so whoever controls Germany, frankly, controls Europe. Now, the French are very noisy and very loud, but it is the Germans that control the Europe through the economy. The French do it through the politics, but the Germans do it through the economy. That's why Angela Merkel was placed in that position. So I totally agree with you. German people are no more warlike than the British, but Britain is an island, and so is not very valuable in terms of creating wars that will inflame the whole of the world. But that's why Germany was chosen. Okay.
Thank you. So who is afraid of us?
Well, what people are afraid of is a very powerful economy with people they can't control. So the very same people who until recently rule the world, and we know these people like the Pesos family, huge other numbers of bankers. They're not just politicians, they're generally bankers. They're people who have connections with a huge deal of wealth, who had a lot to make. Remember that the Bush family in 1941 was selling oil to both America and Germany, even though America was at war with Japan and Germany. And so there are powerful, very powerful families who have sought to, if you can't control, to destroy. And so anybody who's evil, who has a lot of money, would wish to control Germany. If you think about Belgium, that is, where we tend to think about politics. But apart from places like Strasbourg and The Hague and all of that we associate with what we call the Low Countries, they don't come up at all in our thinking. When does Holland come up? No disrespect, I'm not being rude, but when does Holland come up in our thinking? When does Finland come up? It doesn't. But Germany comes up time and time and time again. And so rich, powerful people wish to control Germany because they want to control all of Europe.
Thank you. So who wants to take advantage of the Germans?
Well, we talked about the Pesos family. Of course, the families were removed from positions of power in 2000 and between 2018 and 2020. So anybody, you could think about a chief executive of a big company like Walt Disney, for instance. When we think about taking control, the modern word is advertising. What's the point in advertising to a country with 20 million or 30 million when I can advertise to a country with 60, 70, 80, 90 million? So don't just think about control and manipulation in terms of the politics. Think about the economy. Think how big corporations want to control governments, German governments, simply because they want those contracts. And so just about everyone and anybody who is powerful wants to be involved in Germany. But most of us, when we are doing a business deal, we just stick within the business world. But there are these individuals And we always talk about the Rothschilds. That's a name that always comes up. And there's always, that's always a name thrown into the hat, even though actually the Rothschilds are nothing more than just shopkeepers. They are the managers of the shop for the real powerful people. Well, why would you be interested in Germany? Because Germany has a vibrant population. It has a strong economy, because it has Russia on its borders, and it has a lot of ex-Soviet countries around it, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, all in a sort of a line that we know rubbing shoulders with Germany. And we never associate these countries with France. We don't think about it. We always think about what we used to call the Eastern Europeans, although many of them prefer to be called Central Europeans now. But it's always Germany. So Germany is like a match waiting to be struck. You have all of these countries either side, some poor, some rich, some very nationalistic, some communist. And if you create a trouble in Germany, you're bound to create trouble on one of these countries. Poland, of course, is very careful with Germany, even today, very careful of politics with the Poles, because, the stronger Germany gets, the more concerned other countries are. And if it hadn't been for the deal between America and Gorbachev running Russia, the Eastern Berlin Wall would never have come down, because so many countries didn't want the wall to come down, that didn't want Germany unified. I know that in your classrooms since 1950, from 1950 to 1990, every classroom had a map of Germany without the Berlin Wall, without the division. So all children were taught in their early school years that Germany was one. So when the Berlin Wall came down, whether they were East German or West German, there was a huge movement towards that. But that was not reflected by other countries. And if we think back to when Adolf Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland, as either 33 or 34, I can't remember, it's 36, but that happened, and all the other countries didn't want it, but didn't get involved. And in the same way, when the Berlin Wall came down, other countries were very concerned, because they knew that Germany was now on the way to become very powerful. So how do you stop it? Well, I'll tell you how you stop it. You bring a million refugees into Germany who don't speak German, and they need housing, they need medical care, they need food, and you then set one group against another. So the best way to destroy a country is to destroy it from the inside. So the elite have worked since the last 10 years to destroy Germany from the inside, whereas World War I and World War II were about destroying Germany from the outside coming in, but they decided that doesn't work, so they wanted to start it from the inside. And I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Who has an interest in a population decline or economic reduction, as we are the cash cow for so many?
Well, one mustn't be German-centric. One must understand that the people who come up with these most evil agendas don't think about individual countries. Excuse me. They think about the whole planet, the whole Earth. And so they had a plan to reduce the population, but they didn't necessarily say the population reduction will be greater in this country or that country. To answer your question directly, if you reduce the population, you don't need as many factories. You don't need as much production. And the elite people no longer need what countries produce, because they have everything they want. So if Germany were to stop producing tomorrow, maybe in 25 years' time, they might run out of Mercedes-Benz motor car parts? I don't know. But just because Germany is a very powerful country is no reason to think that somebody would try to save it. If anything, it's a threat. So you will find that in African countries, their plan was for a much bigger depopulation. And in the Western countries, it was for a smaller. But overall, the target they were looking at was between 65 and 75% reduction in the population. That was their overall figure, simply because they didn't want to share the earth with us. They didn't want to have to go out and see people like us. They wanted to go out and have thousands of hectares without seeing anybody. That was their idea. Their idea was to go to the Rhine and look along the Rhine and not see anybody and say, this is all mine. And it's that mindset that don't want to share. And it could be the Rhine, it could be, the Seine in France, it could be the Thames in Britain. It doesn't matter. It's a beautiful part of the country these people don't want to share. Okay.
Thank you. What could be the Germans' spiritual contribution?
This is a very, very difficult question, because the German people have been made to feel guilty since 1945. And so it's very difficult for German people to throw off the image that their own governments have given them and the world has projected on them. So German people are frightened to be strong because they will be accused of being racist or Nazi or this or that. And young people in Germany have tended to go within themselves and to find their own expression and not engage in society in the same way as people in France or Britain or America for that matter. And so until the Germans can challenge and throw off a false history, a false lie, and realize that the German people have the right to be proud, because to be proud in Germany is to be racist, to be a fascist. But you people should have the right to be proud and not be worried that somebody is going to accuse them of something. So what I'm saying to you is that that aspect can only come when each German man and woman says to themselves that this is a lie, that I'm speaking now from someone, I am not responsible for what my grandfather did. It's so important. Great Britain had the biggest slave trade in the world. Britain was taking black people from Africa, sending them to Jamaica, all over the world. I don't say, oh, I'm terribly sorry, because I'm not responsible for that. I wouldn't do it. But I'm not going to be made to feel guilty. But what's happened in Germany is that young people are made to feel guilty and frightened to hold a debate, frightened to talk, frightened to say anything. And you've got to realize that this is totally wrong, and you've got to be strong. So I just think that it's about understanding that people are being controlled, because as long as people feel guilty, they won't be strong. And that's the best I can do. Okay.
Thank you. What could be our task in the future?
You mean Germany's task in the future? Very important, because from an economic point of view, it's what's going to happen to Deutsche Bank. If Deutsche Bank were to fall, the economic situation for Germany is very difficult. If that fall is managed, what we expect is Deutsche Bank to close and to be replaced by what we call the German bullion bank, the Deutsche Bullion Bank. The difficulty is that the European Central Bank, the ECB, has a very close relationship with the Deutsche Bank. The truth is that Deutsche Bank doesn't have much money, real money, doesn't have much real money. And it's very, very dependent on the trust and the hope. That's all that's keeping it going, trust and hope. Now, when that trust and hope goes, Deutsche Bank will close. But I'm fairly confident that a new system will come in very quickly, because the devastation from losing the Deutsche Bank would be quite difficult. For the future, Germany actually can catch up and overtake other countries. And I don't mean economically, I mean spiritually. Because once the German people have shown the truth about how they were forced into a war, how that was all played and tricked, and therefore they shouldn't feel guilty. It's almost as if millions of Germans in 1939 were walking down the street shouting, "We want a war." I haven't seen a single video of Germans in 38, 39, 40 walking down the street shouting, "We want a war." I've not seen that. So, but that's the way you think it was. That's the way that the media seemed to portray it, that Germany was just itching for a war. What Germany was itching for was fairness from the Versailles Treaty. They don't want a war. They just wanted it to be fair. Do away with reparations. Do it properly. And so when you look at it, it was a complete manipulation, both the First War and the Second War. And once Germans are taught that in school and university, then I think that they can relax and actually be spiritual and proud, and not be frightened that people will point their finger at them and say, you're a what we call a closet fascist. It's hard for Germany, a lot of healing required, not because of the war, but because of the way successive governments have tricked German people.
Thank you. I'm Martina I'm the coordinator from North Rhine-Westphalia. And my question is, have you heard about a program Bell over Germany that wise teachers from Russia talk about?
I haven't looked at all the questions. You sent some of the questions over, and that is the one question that I had about a week ago. Interestingly enough, somebody from Russia was talking to me and mentioned it, and I should have followed it up, but I've been a bit busy, so I can't answer that one. Although somebody did bring that to my attention, and if I'd said to them, "Tell me what you know," I could give you more. But no. So what I can say to you is that I know that's truth in that, because someone from Russia who I trust has come to me, but I didn't debate. So I can't give you any information. What I can tell you is that when I get it in the next week or so, I'll write through the coordinators, and you can have that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I'm Uli. I'm the coordinator of Bavaria. And the question is, could you please share your knowledge about the group of people that was sent to Antarctica by Admiral Dönitz in World War II? There are rumors that this group is still active on a very high level.
I'm really impressed with the question, because most people don't understand. They think that Admiral Dönitz didn't have any say in it. There's a very important reason that Hitler actually made Dönitz the last leader. I don't think he made him a chancellor. I just think he made him this. Dönitz, Grand Admiral Dönitz, to give him his full title, was quite a knowledgeable man. Now, everyone talks about Himmler and thinks that Himmler and the SS were involved in the Tibetan operation or Antarctica. But of course, to get to these places, you need ships. You need boats and airplanes. And so Dönitz was the go-to guy simply because he was head of the Navy. He had the ability to transport ships, etc. But he was also actually, believe it or not, he was a bit of an enigma. He was trusted by Hitler, and the other key players of the Third Reich didn't really recognize Dönitz as a threat. Some of them did, but not really, because Dönitz kept himself out. Dönitz had an interest in the occult, but he wasn't as deeply into it as some of the others. Dönitz was just simply told by Hitler to go and recover some artifacts. Ever since the days of King Solomon's Temple, there's been a search by the Crusaders and many other groups to try to recover objects that could hold a more than a mystic power. They could actually be like an electronic device. What Hitler was looking for was not aliens here in Antarctica. What he was looking for were an offshoot of Tibetans, people from Tibet who had, it was rumored, had super special abilities, psychic abilities. And what Hitler wanted was to understand that so that he could have his soldiers, or part of his soldiers, have this psychic capability. Now we must remember, part of my answer is 1933, a space vehicle, a spacecraft, crashed in the Black Forest. And what the SS got out from that spacecraft was basically the reactor. So what we call a cold fusion reactor. So that was recovered from the spacecraft. Now the problem, I'm going on a bit, but hope your members will find it interesting. The problem was that uranium, the enrichment of that, many of the other technical manufacturing processes could only be done in Britain, France, and America. So Germany lagged behind, and so it wasn't in a position to create a bomb out of this, which is what the Americans did. So what the Germans did was they said, we won't look on it as a bomb, what we've got here, we'll look on it as a propulsion device. And so that is why, remember that the British commandos destroyed what we call a heavy water plant that Germany had out in the cold area, because the Germans were on that, but it wasn't their priority. Their priority was how to produce a propulsion system, whereas the Americans were how to make a bomb out of it. And so Hitler had the spear of destiny, which was possessed by a demonic force. He knew that. Hitler had seen non-human entities. Hitler had military proof that spacecraft had crashed. So he was desperate to obtain as much technology as he could to fight them off, just as America was to do 10, 15 years later. So both the Germans and the Americans were on a mad rush to obtain as much technology as possible to basically defend themselves against anything from another world. And that is why Dönitz was entrusted with that operation. But Dönitz was always on the edge of the Nazi elite. He was never right in the middle. And that's actually what kept him alive during those times, because he was never a threat to anybody. It's a very interesting man, Dönitz. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Another question would be, what role does Antarctica and Neuschwabenland play these days?
Maybe the members will remember, maybe three or 4 years ago, in the mainstream media, newspapers, photographs of ice melting in Antarctica and a strange shape appearing, and it was a circular shape. Now, to this day, I don't know why mainstream media were trying to tell the truth. It didn't make any sense. But just before President Trump was elected in 2016, Obama sent one of the old astronauts from the Apollo missions, and the Pope went, and a number of people went there, and it was never explained why. And we know why, because they were trying to shore up their position with what we would call Fourth Reich elements. Remember that Admiral Byrd, the United States admiral, tried to attack and suffered heavy losses because weapons were used that he couldn't counter. And so there's been a group in this location ever since whom they've just left alone. The deal was, don't bother us, we won't bother you. But they were sitting, this group was sitting on ancient technology that was millions of years old. So it wasn't technology they had, it was millions of years old. And when President Trump came in, his plan was to get this technology. And so that's what happened in 2017. There was a big operation to take out what they could. And so, the group that were there, I don't know what happened to them. I guess some sort of arrangement was made, because by then America had weapons that, would be effective. It was Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan was president, that was the turning point. At that point, during Ronald Reagan's presidency, the United States then had weapons that were effective against off-planet entities. Prior to that, they couldn't. So that's what Ronald Reagan called Star Wars. Okay. Okay. So
Lou, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Simon, again. Sorry for the interruption. I'm Lou from the region Rhineland-Pfalz and Saarland. These are our questions. As we are still occupied by the Allies, who is really in power and running this country? Is SHAEF in charge, and are the SHAEF laws the current legal framework? Are the so-called officials like politicians, policemen, judges, or school leaders just toothless tigers with no legal and executive power? Are the courts still under the control of the deep state, or already under the white hats?
thank you. You're absolutely right, of course, and you know that you are. You have no constitution. That was deliberate. You were supposed to get a constitution. It was actually written into the plan. And by 1950, it was very clear you were never going to get that constitution. And so the Allied powers still continued to rule Berlin and thus all of Germany. Let's just forget the Russian half at the moment. Let's forget the Soviet part. Basically, unfortunately, it was very helpful for the Allied powers to prevent Germany having a constitution. The thinking was that if you had a constitution, you would become a Bismarck, or you would, go back and, form an empire and have a Kaiser. So they didn't give Germany a constitution, and that was the reason, officially. And then what we call the deep state, the people who control the world, realized that without a constitution, Germany could be run as a puppet state. And that's exactly what happened, that all of Germany was run not through, the Bundes government. It was simply run through a handful of people, probably in Italy, probably in America, maybe in South America. And so that was a deliberate point. Now, when we change, what will happen is that Germany will have to have a constitution. It won't go back to 1871 or whatever it was. It won't go back to that, because that is an empire. But what must happen is it must have its constitution, and it will be a constitution very similar to the United States of America. You're already a republic in the true sense of the word, federal republic, because it was a copy of America. It really was, but without the protection of a Bill of Rights and without the protection of a constitution. So all Germany needs is a Bill of Rights, true Bill of Rights, and a true constitution. And then your policemen, your doctors, your school teachers will actually be bound by the rule of that constitution, rather than an, I'll call it an agency, a government that is making the laws up as it goes along. And that's what's happened in Germany. It doesn't have to check back to see if what it is doing is illegal. That's what a constitution does. If an organization has a constitution, then those that run that organization have to go back and say, am I allowed to do this? So without the constitution, German leaders could be made to do anything, and it suited people very nicely. And that's why they've kept people in Germany guilty and oppressed, because nobody really is asking for a constitution. There are groups, but there isn't a huge mass of people saying we want a constitution, because people don't see it relevant. German people don't see the relevance of it. And that has to be made relevant to people. So all you need is a Bill of Rights and a constitution, and all of those officials who have made Germany so awful will either have to change or go. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That was already the answer for the next question we had on our list. So Ella, please, would you continue with your...
Okay, so continuing with the questions, is the SHAEF or the SHAEF, the laws, the current legal framework?
No, it's not. That was the legal framework, I would say, between 1947, when your first Deutsche Bank started to produce German banknotes. I think it was 1947, up to in 45, 46, and first part of 47, you had Allied banknotes. It's a really important point here. From, I think, 47, 48, Germany was allowed to print its own banknotes. This is Western Germany I'm talking about. And so the rule that you refer to ran from about 1948 up through Billy Brandt's time, up to the 80s, and then the globalists, the super powerful, took over, and they were running it, and they were literally running it as a corporation. So the military side, France, America, Britain, withdrew. This happened in the late 80s, and then Germany was run much more of a corporation, and that's what caused them to take the wall down, because they realized that Germany would never make the amount of money they wanted if it was divided. So they had to undivide Berlin, and that was another really important point, because they wanted Germany to be back to where it was. And so in order to do that, they had to destroy the Soviet Union. So make no mistake, Gorbachev and his cronies were paid a most enormous amount of money. I have spoken to the person who saw the electronic check, the money going, and within 30 seconds, it had gone through 6 bank accounts, and within 15 minutes, this check had gone like 20 countries, so that it couldn't be traced. It had just gone everywhere, and it ended up with we would call the Russian elite, which was to buy them off and buy off all the very senior generals to accept the destruction of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet influence in countries like Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. And this was all part of the plan to get Germany big and strong and then see what they could do with it. I mean, I am sure that they had intended a Third World War. I'm absolutely positive that their plan was for Germany to be involved in a Third World War. And that's one of the reasons that the White Hats military have stepped in at this time, because any plan to destroy humanity will require these bad people to get involved in Germany. And we know that Angela Merkel and certain other leaders were put in a position and supported. I mean, Angela Merkel's been, is it 15 years she's been there, something like that. And the only reason she's been there is because the media have so supported her. And the reason they've so supported us because they were ordered to, because Angela Merkel would do what this elite group wanted. So it's a very interesting period of your history. Everybody focuses on the two wars, but the reality is the run-up, the 80s, the run-up to the wall coming down was an incredibly important time, because it's when, as you call it, the Allied forces withdrew their control and the global corporations, the globalists, took over running of Germany. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess this will fall in part of your answer already, and that is whether the control is under the deep state or under the White Hats.
Right, just repeat that bit, Lou. Which is under the control?
Are the courts still under the control of the deep state or under the White Hats at the moment?
Right, all courts over the whole of the earth are running to maritime or naval law, which is a deep state controlled rule, which is many, many years old. So at the moment, all courts are run by the bad side. And when we make this change, we will have to go to what we call either common law or natural law. So we take the politics out of courts. So at the moment, the small person can't easily win a battle in court because everything is working towards the cabal, the deep state. Okay.
Thank you. And the last is, many commentators suggest to go back in history and put Germany in the legal frames like the German Empire of 1871, where there was a legal constitution. To become a sovereign country again, do we have to go back and reactivate a former status? You had already answered somehow this question, but...
Thank you, Lou. Yes, I have. And I said 1871. The problem we have for Germany at that time is that it is fixed in people's minds that it's an empire. It was, working towards an empire. And so you don't have to go back to 1871. You just have to be given a new constitution next year. So in 2022, you have to receive a Bill of Rights and a constitution, which your own people will help to make. You don't go back, you're going forward. Lou, before you go on, were you born in Germany?
No, I was not.
What part of America were you born in?
I was born in South America.
Right.
I was raised up between the US,
yes,
South America, England,
yeah,
Italy, and then now I live in Germany.
Right, excellent. I was struggling to work out, because you have an accent which is very interesting, and I could tell that there was some what I would call American in there. So thank you for explaining where that's come from. But did you ever go to Did you ever go to Mississippi or Alabama?
Yes, I have. I know just about the whole U.S.
Okay. Have you ever
South
lived?
and West.
Okay. Have you ever lived or stayed a little while in Mississippi or Alabama?
Yes, I have.
The reason I'm saying that was because I hear that accent in you. How many years ago were you there, please?
That was back in the 80s.
All right, so it's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
so that's interesting. Lou, you must forgive me. I pride myself on understanding a person's history, and it's put you in a very strong position because you have different cultures. You have understood different cultures, and I think that's really nice. It's the first time I've met you properly, so thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. I'm Edda, co-coordinator for the region of Baden-Württemberg. And the next cluster of questions is, to what extent is Germany in the hands of the White Hats or the deep state? What would be visible signs to indicate that actors or measures we see are from the White Hats? How can we be sure that we are not being told lies? How can we get rid of the corrupt government, and what is the key for freedom? This is the first cluster, and now the first.
Let me just do that first one, because it's a really good question. How do you know what you're seeing as the truth? What we've noticed is the removal of favor and power from Angela Merkel and no real obvious successor. And that's important because nobody really wants these positions across Europe anymore. Nobody wants to be the president of France or the president of Canada. Nobody wants to be the Prime Minister of Britain or the Chancellor of Germany because the White Hats do have control of Germany. It's recent. I would say the military White Hat control of Germany is within the last 6 to 8 months. It's quite recent, whereas other countries have been under the White Hat control for 2 or 3 years. So Germany is quite recent, and we know that the head of the CIA was hiding in Frankfurt in a CIA building. That's how confident they were to put their operations in Germany, because Germany doesn't have a constitution. It doesn't have a legal framework. And so where a country does not have a constitution, then these bad organizations will set up operations because it does not break any international laws or rules. Now, when the good guys, and there was a gun battle, took control of that place in Frankfurt, and they arrested the woman's name, I think it was Gina, head of the CIA, and they did take casualties. I think the good guys had 3 or 4 people killed in that gun battle. But that was the turning point, because anybody who was bad or evil would know what happened. Angela Merkel would know what's happened. Many of these other people know what's happened. And so what they're doing is they're playing out day for day. They're just what we call doing the job. But they don't have the support of anybody behind them now. And when Angela Merkel first came into politics, she had the great support of a multi-trillion euro organization behind her. She doesn't have it now. And so what I think is that the military in Germany have turned their back on the lies that the last government has been pushing out. So we know that the German military, and I'm including the Air Force in that, okay, are, I would say, 3/4 supportive of the White Hats. What will happen is those that aren't will just stay in their barracks. Those that don't want to get involved will just stay indoors, and those soldiers that are, ready for the White Hats will come out and distribute food or do what have you. Germany is a very difficult situation because the White Hats feel the responsibility. It's not just about Africa, where white people have systematically destroyed many countries. White people systematically destroyed Germany. White people destroyed white people. We need to understand that the history books, and I've said it, but I'll repeat it, the history books we buy and are available to our schools and universities are not actually telling the truth for the real causes of the war. How can anybody believe what we're told when every history book I have on my bookshelf here tells me that Adolf Hitler died in 1945 in the bunker, when my mother and my grandfather joked all the time how Hitler was in South America and it was a deal done. So somebody at some point has got to actually get to the truth and be brave enough to publish books and change the law to explain why everybody has been lied to. And it's always about money. Do you remember the story about the Goering's gold bullion train going into the tunnel in Germany and never coming out the other end? Because either it was MacArthur or one of the American generals just took all the gold. There were all these side deals going on to buy people freedom. And I'll just finish off with talking about the war. I get very cross with supposed historians who are supposed to be very clever, who say, oh, Martin Bormann, he's not important, he was just a secretary. And they just ignore him. Now, anybody in Germany who has a club, a group, Boy Scouts or whatever it is, that the most important and the most powerful person is the secretary, because the secretary opens all the letters, the secretary reads the emails, the secretary tells people what's going on. And so it was Bormann who organized the escape, and it was Bormann who actually masterminded the connection between the German scientists and America. Because people say to me, well, what did Hitler have to bargain with? What he had was scientists with technology that was 25 years ahead of the best technology the Americans had. And that was the deal. It wasn't, the generals wanted the gold, but the top guys in America, they were after information and technology. And Bormann was the guy that organized that, So we need to understand that Germany's history is a lie from the beginning to the end. And it's going to be very interesting to unravel that. And I don't know how, the Leipzig University is going to cope with having to rewrite its history for its university students. It's very interesting. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. What would be visible signs to indicate that actors or measures we see are from the White Hats?
At the moment, those signs are being given in America because that is where the main battle is. 2 seconds. What are you growling for? Stop growling. Just the dog is growling. Why are you growling? Why are you growling? What is it? Go on. You silly. What are you growling for? 2 seconds. Why are you growling? What? Why are you growling? There's nobody there. Stop it. Stop it. There we go. Sometimes when people who don't know, come on, will laugh. When a nasty psychic attack occurs, interestingly enough, dogs and cats can pick up things that humans can't. Now, cats are more, I'll come back to your question, but I'll just pick up what happened here. Cats are more fourth dimensional, dogs are fifth dimensional. So they perceive, just to explain why dogs are fifth fifth dimensional because a dog gives love unconditionally. A cat doesn't. A cat does not give love unconditionally. A cat is fourth dimension, and dogs are fifth dimensional. And so when, let's say someone's trying to do a remote view, they're trying to psychically come into this room and have a presence. Sometimes a cat will pick it up, sometimes a dog. Now he's growling, there's nothing there to my eyes, but he's absolutely certain something's there. And we get that quite a lot. So let's go back to your question. In America, it's very important for the white hats to show there are things going on because it's where the war is. But in Germany and Austria and other countries, Switzerland, there's a covert operation. And the last thing they want to do is tell you guys what they're doing because you get in the way. And I talked about this before when during the war, both the Brits and the Americans were looking at the war and they'd say, well, we've got 30,000 refugees fleeing from the Russians coming down this road. That's really going to stop our operation. We can't get any tanks through there. And the Germans would be saying the same thing. And so all militaries don't like the general public getting in their way. They don't like to be asked questions. They don't like to be physically stopped. It's uncomfortable for them. And so what's happened in every country except America is covert operations. Now, I think as we go into Christmas and into January, then the people of Germany will see things that are deliberately meant to be seen. They'll be very obvious. We are waiting here for Her Majesty the Queen of England to be announced dead. We are waiting for Biden to announce he's stepping down. These are key elements, an emergency broadcast system, the television being turned off, your phones having recorded messages. These are the things that will make people believe. Now, I don't know about Germany, but 3 or 4 days ago, I was sent the words for the emergency broadcast system for South Africa. So we've seen what is going to be sent over the phones to South Africa. We've seen that. And each country will be different. So it must be in your own language, but it will be slightly different. So the Americans will get a different version from the Germans. So we don't have long to wait now. It will become very obvious very soon. Good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the next cluster, even bigger. How will Germany be affected by the outcome of changes in the US as our executive occupier? Will the future US...
Let's just take one at a time. If you've got lots of questions, I won't remember them. So we'll just do it one at a time. Germany will be equally affected, as will Britain, France. But the difference for Germany is it's desperately in need of this Bill of Rights and a constitution. And Germany is desperately in need of new elections, but elections held freely and fairly. So the first thing that Germany will actually understand is a constitution, a Bill of Rights, and free and fair elections. And then the changing of history and the changing of law, how your courts work, how your police work. So that is how it will affect. So America must go first, and then all the other countries will follow.
What can or should the Germans do to
You're not reading from the questions, are you?
help things along? Well, it just followed. You got me.
That's fine. I'll answer you. It's all right.
Thank you.
I think it's important that the Germans do not become involved in international politics at this stage. Keep out of it. Don't get involved. There are too many enemies. What I think Germans need to do is to actually understand that in the 1920s, Berlin was the home of culture. It rivaled Paris. You had great artists, sculptures. They pushed out the normal rules, and they were bohemian, and they were great creators. Yes, there was a lot of decadence, but what I'm saying is that the Germans are capable of creating their own world without somebody else coming in telling you what to do. So my advice to Germans is, don't look to others to tell you how you should be, because it's been like that since the 1940s. Tell yourselves what you want and create it yourself. And I think that when enough good men and good women come forward, then that's when that'll happen. So I think next year. Okay.
Thank you. The next one. Will the future government, US government, have an interest in a sovereign Germany?
I could be very naughty and say, why wouldn't they? I don't quite know how that's going to translate into German. They absolutely do have, because Germany has been used to make wars. My priority, if I was in charge, would definitely be Germany. I'd much rather get that done than worry about Holland or Lapland or Italy, for that matter. So it's vital that Germany is not ever manipulated again and ends itself up in another war. So yes, the new incoming true government will definitely want Germany to break free from the controls. It doesn't mean all the refugees you've got. It doesn't mean throwing them back out. It's not about that. It's about saying, this is where we are now. How do we go forward in a way that is beneficial to the people and not the government? The problem with Germany is that it's always been very officially run, and people are happy. That's not the right word I want. People are used, they're normal to do what they're told. It's always been like that. And people in Europe are rude about the Germans and say that, that they're, they're they can build good motor cars, or they follow procedures. And that's just rude from other countries' perspective. The point about the Germans is they are particular. They want things done right, and they want them done in the right order. And when you have a mindset or a culture that's like that, it's easy to take control of it. People who are more rebellious, free thinking, they don't like that controlled order. And so when you force a people to become controlled and ordered and to have respect, it's very easy to manipulate them. So I think what's got to happen is German people have got to throw the chains off them, frankly, and be much more free and get used to being proud and saying the word nein. So push back and don't be pushed around anymore. Okay.
So would President Trump see Germany as an equal partner on eye level in the future?
I don't think, in the future that I've seen, I don't think any country will be the equal of America. But if you're asking me, would President Trump sit down at a table with a new German leader, then the answer is yes, definitely he would, or whoever comes after President Trump, because Germany is the country. I'm not talking geographically here, I'm talking politically. Germany is the country that sits between the West and Russia. Now, we know that Russia and America are very close friends. So when we stop all these games pretending to be at war with each other, then instead of Germany feeling that it's got the great Russian bear bit on one side of it, then I think that what will happen is that everyone will become equal. But to use a George Orwell term, some people are more equal than others. America, of course, will call the shots. After the Second World War, America was clearly the country that ran the world. And then in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen countries like Japan and China, beginning to step up, and India, who could challenge for that position. Now, with the change coming next year, that type of competition won't be there, because we know that Putin and Trump get on. We know that President Xi of China get on. Japan had its stomach blown to pieces, and I can be absolutely honest about that, with that reactor that exploded, and we know that that was a cabal deep state attack to destroy Japan. And so what we've got, I think, is Germany that will actually be able to be friends with everybody. And whilst it won't be America's equal, it will certainly be the country that you will need to speak to, because it's such an economic powerhouse. But it's going to need a lot of medical attention. There's an awful lot of medical needs in Germany, and that's not widely known. I know that's a fact, but it's not widely known. You have many, many people with diseases in Germany, from heavy industry, from pollution, from just the way of life. And so Germany needs a great deal of healing. And I would say to you that Germany needs more healing than France does, or Spain, or even Italy. So I think Germany should be a priority. Okay.
The next one, will a peace treaty be the first step, and who would be authorized to sign for Germany?
Right. Did you say a peace deal? You broke up a little bit.
Peace treaty.
Do you mean the ending of the war? Is that what you're referring to? Okay, fine.
I think the question refers to it. It is not my personal question, yes.
Yeah, I understand that question. It was important for the Allies to keep Germany in a state of war because it prevented any constitution. It prevented the German people from ever, having a normal life. So it's not actually a peace treaty. It will be, it's a difficult wording here, it will be the recognition that the cessation of let me get it right, because I've seen this written down. It's his recognition of the cessation of hostilities between the Allied powers and the German, they don't say peoples, they just say the German government ended on, and I think it's, I don't know, May or June 1945. So it's not a peace treaty. It's a recognition that Germany has been unfairly kept in a state of war. So we don't need to make the peace because we're already at peace, but we need to recognize that the documentation, the laws, were never brought up to date to take account of the fact that actually there is no wars. So the answer to your question is yes, but it won't be a peace.
Yeah.
Who will sign it? I genuinely don't know. I just don't know. I don't know whether it's a thing that chancellors sign or presidents sign, or whether you just literally get a group of people, from the Unter den Linden or the Hindenstrasse to come up and just sign. Maybe they do that. Maybe it's signs from the people. I have no idea. I'm hoping that the world ahead of us, the governments ahead of us, involve ordinary people in decision making. I think that that's what I'm looking for, so that you have ordinary people who are around the table, and it isn't just the elite. Now, I don't know whether that's going to happen, but that's certainly what I'm going to be asking people to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two more on this cluster. What else would be the requirements for Germany to become a sovereign state with legal representatives?
I have actually answered that question. It is literally Constitution, Bill of Rights, the ending of a state of war, removal of most of your government, and you're changing from, now we're going to laugh now, but the removal of the euro coin and you going back to the Deutschmark. because that is the plan. You will go back to the Deutschmark. The French will go back to the franc. The Spanish will go back to the peseta. Because I can tell you, in the first wave of economic reforms coming, there is not a single euro coin note country involved. No country using the euro is in that first group of discussions, because it's understood that, you know, that the European Union is the new world order. It is a government within a government, and basically I am expecting in the not too distant future that to fall apart, and all sovereign nations, and here's coming back to your question, sovereign nations having a sovereign currency. After all, the Swiss never joined the European Union, and they kept their franc. They didn't go for the euro. So why weren't they? They're in the European. It's because they're very powerful, they're very different, and they weren't going to be manipulated. All the other countries were going to be manipulated for reasons that maybe I don't fully understand. Britain realized that this was a new world order, and we never took the euro coin, even when we were in Europe, and we got out of Europe. And I think we got out because we're just an island, and we don't like European governments. We don't like Strasbourg. People love, actually, you'll laugh at this, people love Germans. People love the Italians. I'm afraid people don't like the French at the moment. There's a lot of political problems between Britain and France. But actually, you know, people are very close to the Germans. And I think that you'll find in the future that that Britain and Germany will have a much closer relationship in the future than they have now. So I think that that is where Britain will make its connections with Germany and not with France. Okay.
Thank you. And now the last question in this cluster. How can we strengthen the relationship to Russia?
Well, when the leaders of Germany have gone, that will naturally happen. You've got all of this politics with the Nord gas. You've got all of the politics with the countries that surround you. And of course, what happens in Ukraine does affect Germany, affects Austria. So when the present German government has gone, then you'll find that the relationships, and I did touch on this some 7, 8, 9 minutes ago, you know, you won't have a problem. You know, you won't have a problem. In fact, the Germans will probably have more of a problem with the French than they will with the Russians, because what the Russians will want is that German attitude to technology. All right, so the Russians and the Germans can work very closely together, and they proved that. Now, let's not forget that in 1934, Hitler signed a deal with Russia, and he was only formalizing what had happened in the 1920s, when there was an exchange of technologies, particularly with tanks. The Germans were, you know, sending their tanks to Russia, and Russia was copying them. The Russians were sending their tanks to Germany. The Russians didn't send the T-34. They deliberately held the T-34 back in the KV tanks. But basically what happened was that the Russians recognized that the German technology was a good, and the Germans recognized that the Russians had a different way of overcoming technical problems. If you give a German a problem, he or she will go through a logical set of steps and come to the answer. You give a person to the Russians, they'll throw things up in the air and they'll come up with an answer. And all I'm saying is that if you can put both of those cultures together, you could actually have it don't have to be an international space station. You could have a Russian-German this or a Russian-German that. And I actually think that again is a very important future. Why would Germany be particularly bothered about Italy or France or Spain when they've got a massive market millions and millions of people in the Russian Federation. And, you know, Russia wants to expand, not militarily, Russia wants to expand in terms of its commerce. Well, you know, do it through Germany. So I don't see a threat. I see it as very helpful.
Thank you very much, Simon. My next question would be from the list. Since a few weeks, mainstream media reports almost every day about aerial bombs from World War II that are deactivated or controlled blown. And there are a lot of scanning flights over Germany. Is there anything you can share about dumps and rescued children in our country?
There's two parts to the answer. The first one is that there genuinely is a push by the White Hats to send a message out that there are the potential for explosions. We had one in Britain. They were saying that a Second World War bomb from a German bomber was in the Thames and could blow up and blow the Houses of Parliament up. It was just nonsense. But this was put out as a warning, as a threat to the bad guys. But what your questioner is really asking, the real question here is, are there underground bases that are being blown up? And so the story being given is it's a Second World War British or American bomb. Well, the answer is that generally no. There have been, to my knowledge, one instance where they said that a Grand Slam bomb, that's an American bomb, a Grand Slam bomb had been found and they had to do a self-detonation on it. But the point is that none of these bombs are in the middle of a city, because if they blew up, it would, you know, kill an awful lot of people. And so it's easier actually to say that there's a gas explosion, pipeline explosion. And most underground bases are very deep under the earth. People tend to think of a steel door and you go down a few steps and then you're there. Some of these are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kilometers underground. You don't hear an explosion, but what you detect is a small earthquake, small tremors. I'm just going to lift the dog. Come on then. Come here. Come on. Come on. Come on. Look at it crossing your mouth there. Stop it. Come here. Oh, God. Come here. Come and say hello. There we are, love. There we are. Oh, boy. Sit there. So what we often find is that they're more concerned about geologists or volcanologists who are detecting these movements under the earth and then making a question about it. So they'll say, oh, well, there was a bomb that we found and we detonated that bomb and that's what caused it. So the answer is the White Hats will use any excuse to try to cover up an operation because they don't want sightseers, they don't want public, they want the media going there because it's not their time to be open and honest. In terms of children, my understanding is that all of the bases in Germany have been dealt with. There aren't now any underground bases containing children. Most of the bad guys in Europe have been rounded up. Not all, but most of them. And so Germany now is like a clock that has been wound up and the hands are just going round, but nobody is controlling it. And I think we're just waiting now for governments to resign. That's what I'm expecting. Across the globe, governments to. I mean, you may not have heard it today, guys, but the chief executive of Twitter, the CEO of Twitter, has resigned. And what we will be looking for are these key people in social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, resigning and going. And that's a start. And then the government starts to resign. People, and it's all done as, oh well, you know, I'm ill, or I want to be with my family. And, you know, it's never for the truth. It's never the truth reasons. But that's what we're going to be looking for governments just to collapse. And economically, you know, I don't want to see hardship, but there probably will be some sort of economic situation in Germany because of Deutsche Bank's got no money. Germany is important, and nobody wants people to suffer like that. You can't make millions of people suffer who have already, through their own grandparents, suffered. You know, why would we want people to suffer who've already been suffering? We wouldn't want to do that. So I think that, you know, Germany is a special case. And I certainly, from Connecting Conscious point of view, that's why I'm here today, because I value Germany. That's why I'm doing this, because, you know, Germany is an important country. All countries are important. I don't want to get in trouble here. All countries are important. But Germany has a special position because of its history. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question is, what else does it need for the White Hats to intervene? It's not just regarding Germany, it's regarding the wider space. People already die because they hold back. Why are they waiting to expose COVID as a worldwide lie? And what further development do you suspect?
That's the second hardest question of the night. So I better give the second best answer of the night. The White Hats have a team of psychologists who look at how countries are responding. And they have said that if this problem was cleared very quickly, people wouldn't remember. You know, from Great Britain's point of view, if you were to buy, not history books, just any books from 1945 to 1965, the first 10 years of those books would refer back to the war all the time, because it was in people's memories. As you move on to 15 years and 20 years, the war no longer is an important aspect because it's forgotten. Not forgotten, but we want to forget it. That's the point. You know, a great-grandfather will remember when the British were dropping bombs. He hid under the table. Now, he'll remember that for 30, 40, 50 years. But he won't want to remember it. So what the White Hats have said is, if this situation is cleared up very quickly, in about 3 or 4 years' time, everyone will forget it, and everyone will let the bad guys back in again, because we stop worrying, we stop protecting, we take our guard down. But if the situation plays out, and we see all of this unfolding before our eyes, and it gets pretty bad, then, like the war, people will remember for at least 10 years, and they will say, let's never again let the cabal back into control. Let's never again allow our law courts to start making laws against the people. Never again should our schools and universities teach lies. And so what is happening because the people of the planet need to be educated. Now, you can't put a television screen up and say to everyone, watch this or we'll shoot you, because then you're no better than the cabal. So it has to be a show that takes place in every country of the world, and that you, as the viewer, the audience, you either understand it or you don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, when everything becomes clear, then it's a terribly big shock for you. So there isn't much anyone can do. We have to let this play out until such a time as the majority of the people say, I understand what's going on. And that moment comes, you'll find governments will collapse. It's a difficult question. Okay.
Thank you. Regarding the medbeds and healing centers, could you please elaborate on the rollout process, both globally and here in Germany?
Well, the answer is no, I can't, because I'm not in control of the medbeds. What I can tell you is that CC, that's, you know, me as the head of CC, have been asked to collaborate with the worldwide distribution of medbeds. And what I've said to other coordinator meetings is that where I have a country with a very strong CC membership, a very effective coordinated team, they'll get medbeds. Where I have a country with a weak CC leadership, why would I trust you with them? Because these medbeds are a technology which will never be ours. We will just borrow them. We have to look after them. They're not ours, and at some point we'll have to give them back. And so any country that doesn't have a CC group, someone else will have to go and put medbeds in there. So, you know, CC will be very involved in medbed rollouts in those locations where we have strong coordinators and we have a strong membership. So I don't know what the rollout will be, because somebody's going to say to me, hey Simon, because they'll be American of course, hey Simon, we've got 20 medbeds for you, where do you want them? That's what it's going to be like. Or it'll be, hey listen, we've got 20 for Germany, or we've got 20 for Austria, or we've got 20 for here. Where are they going to go? That's how it's going to happen. So there will be some negotiation on my part, but you know, I'm not the big player in this. You know, they have asked me to collaborate, which is a great honor, but it does mean that I will have some say, and it does mean, of course, that where we have CC members who are ill, I want them, you know, I want them on the list. I want them to get advantage of the medbeds. People who are not members of CC, well, they can make their own arrangements, can't they? My job is to look after my members and to fight for my members. So let's see, the medbeds will definitely come to Germany, because I've got a good team. It's demonstrated tonight, isn't it? And we've got good members. So you know, well, I won't forget you. If I was going to forget you, I wouldn't be here tonight.
Thank you. So what is required in terms of suitable buildings, infrastructure, and staff profile?
You see what the Germans are like? Look at those questions. Building, staff profile. It's all very, very logical, which is great. So here you go. Brick buildings only. I've got to be solid, strong brick buildings. I do not want something that's got a beautiful view, but takes you a week to get there. These have got to be easily accessible by bus, train, car. They're for the people, you know, not the elite flying in from some island who go in and have a shampoo and have their hair cut and fly out again. This has got to be where people can get there on a ticket. Electric power must be good. They must have a consistent power. What's important is that the power must be consistent. It's no good in an area where you know, we talk in volts. Do you talk in volts? I can't remember. What do you have? Volts, you do, good. Where, you know, it's up and down, 5 volts up, 5 volts down. These machines require consistency, and so there will have to be devices that even out the power that comes through. So a brick-built structure, one that can be easily made safe with CCTV cameras. You know, it's going to have to be guarded because of the technology. Easily accessible by people. Now, the final question is the interesting one. We don't want, I don't particularly want medical experts. People in CC will want to work here in these places. They can't run them because it's not their property, it's not theirs. But what they can do is have a job within that. And the strongest requirement will be spirituality. Look, to repair something, you need to be a technician. So that's not the job that's going to be available. But there will be jobs where you work with people, the patients. There'll be children, there'll be adults, there'll be a whole range of people where you will have a job like that. So we don't necessarily want nurses and doctors. You know, there are some very good nurses and doctors. But there's a lot of nurses and doctors giving people injections and not telling them it's a trial drug. How can you be a good nurse and a good doctor and give someone an injection and not say to them, by the way, this isn't actually officially, it's a trial. They don't do it, do they? I don't really want people like that. I want people who are spiritual, because these machines are part technical, part spiritual. They're not artificial intelligence. There is an artificial intelligence element to it. That's the control, but it's not the brain. The brain of these machines is not a computer in that sense of it. And so, we don't want, whiz kids around it. We want spiritual people who can support people who are maybe not spiritual. Basically, someone who's dying from cancer gets to go on these machines. They're going to need 3 or 4 days counseling before they go on it. A spiritual person won't need anything like that, because a spiritual person can believe in the impossible, right? A person of the system can only believe what the system teaches them. And when I ask someone to think outside of the system, I'm going to need hours to gently move them from one paradigm, sorry about that word, one mental state into another. So what we need are lots of spiritual people, and that's what CC is. So, I'm hoping that a lot of our members across the world are going to get good jobs. Yeah.
Thank you. What are they able to heal, and are there any limits, especially regarding the vaccines?
Okay. I've only had technical discussions and very basic procedural discussions. I am not, when I say qualified, I don't mean as a doctor. I mean, I haven't had that discussion about what they can and what they can't do. But I have had discussion on this vaccine business. And what I've been told is that it can be positive, but it requires more than one visit. So if you had a broken leg, you might only require one visit to this. But if you've got 2 injections and a booster and then another booster, you might have to go back 5, 6, 7 times. I think it depends very much on what vaccine you had or what was given to you. Now, I have had one person say to me, nope, the med beds can't heal that. But I've had 3 other people who said, well, it can, but it's a long process. So, but in terms of, can it grow your teeth? Can it make you younger? I haven't had the document in front of me. I've heard a lot of people say those things to me, but I haven't had the document. I always like the document in front of me, and I haven't been given that because it's guarded. It's hugely guarded, and I don't live in America, and they're not going to send it through the internet because everyone will read it before it even gets to me. I'll be the last person to read it. Can't even get your links. Whenever you guys send me a link, it never gets to me. So, there are certain things that have to wait until I get to America. So I'm not going to answer that, but I will say I've definitely been told it can help with the inoculations, the vaccine, but it takes a long time. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any additional energetic, psychological, or physical therapy needed?
Hundreds. And that's why CC members who are practitioners, who have those skills, whatever they might be, what I see, this is part of my deal, was that person goes in to a med bed, they have the treatment, and then they are recommended to go to these people who will all be hopefully CC members, all practicing Reiki or whatever it will be, so that these med beds are not there to take away the livelihood, the work, the calling of psychic healers. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to provide quick physical repair, and then those other people who have skills would then have a job. So actually they're going to be very busy because quite a lot of people who go into med beds will actually... Why did you do that? Quite a lot of people will say, oh, yes, please, I need to do this, I need to do that. So no, I think it's great. I think that there'll be people at the moment who are practicing their modalities at home, who might then come into the healing center. And so one day a week, they see 4 or 5 patients who have been in the med bed, but now they want some form of massage or they want some form of energy healing, because we're looking in a world where the medical hospital doesn't rule the world anymore. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at where somebody isn't going to be called a witch because they can do this. They're going to be called an alternative therapist and actually be given a contract and a job. So that's a very exciting future.
Okay. Can you please talk about from where the technology of the medbeds originate, and is there only one reliable source that launched real medbeds?
Take it backwards. That'll confuse you. And there are many technologies which are like medbeds, and many people have got them. They are rediscovered, or people get them as what's called a download. They'll have a dream and they'll wake up and they'll make notes. I think the word medbed will probably be a protected word for a particular type of product coming from a particular organization. But other organizations will have similar technology and they will call it something else. So I think that this natural growth of this technology across the world, the difference is that you need a big organization to have the power and the money to put millions of them out there. A small little group who have an equal technology might be able to make 20 med beds a year. Well, that's okay for a village. It's no good for Leipzig. And so what has to happen is that we need big players like the United States military, or an agency that the military contract with, that are able to produce millions of these things. And that's how that will go. And I think that what we will find is that some areas will have more than others to start with. In terms of the technology, my understanding is it's not from here. There's something very similar that's a very old technology, sort of from Romania, where, interestingly enough, modern day scientists are somehow rediscovering this. But I think that if we talk about the Pleiades, the Pleiadians, the fifth dimensional, this has been gifted, but only gifted under contract. In other words, please don't imagine that, somebody can go and buy these med beds and you can have one in your own home. That is not going to happen in the foreseeable future. It's very guarded technology, and it's a gift to humanity. And gifts don't get sold. You have a gift in the true sense of the word, then it belongs to everybody. And when you start selling things, then you start giving one person the gift. And then that means that one person missed out. So what CC will be doing will be running facilities in partnership, and looking after that gift, and then when the time comes, giving that gift back.
Okay. Does Russia or China, for example, have access to this technology too, and provide their own medbeds?
I think Russia will be quite happy to let the Americans supply that technology. The Russians will be quite happy to work with the Americans on it, no problem at all. The Chinese, it's very difficult because we don't know the relationship between the Communist Party and the elder families in China. What used to be called the red and the white dragons, we just perhaps call them Chinese elders. Not clear on the relationship between those two, and so I don't know how that would roll out. I think that the Chinese are very good at replicating things, so maybe they would replicate medbeds simply because they have so many people. Europe, you could manage Europe with a distribution network. You can't do it with China. You're going to have to set up replicating locations in China to be able to do it, but not while the CCP is still in control. Okay. What are we doing? How many more questions are there?
We have about 10 more, but I think the last ones will rather be short for you.
Okay, I'll take the next 10 and I'm going to have to go because it's now 9:30. Okay.
So you please.
Okay, hello, Simon again. What is it needed for the global activity of common law or natural law?
A complete and utter military takeover. Only a complete military takeover will bring in natural law. It doesn't mean tanks on the streets. It doesn't mean that. What it means is the military saying to their governments, we no longer recognize you as a legitimate government, and we are removing you if you don't step down. And then we are going to take out all these elements from our law and replace them with this new law. We need 6 months to train our judges. We'll need 12 months to retrain all our police, and right down to finances, because look how much money is locked into law. For instance, if you have a motor car, you can't afford to pay for that motor car, then they will go to the court and they will get a court order against you. It's going to take a long time, but the first action is to remove a government and to change the way the courts operate. This is the key, the courts and the police. And once that's done, then it will work its way through. So it's a big deal. It's not going to happen easily. It'll have to be done quite forcibly.
Thank you. Will that be introduced in all the countries at the same time?
It can't be, simply because different countries have different populations, different structures. For instance, think of a modern industrialized nation and compare that to a country that is more rural, more agricultural, and maybe doesn't have anything like the organization there. I honestly don't know whether they'd start at the top end, the hard part, where there's, 60, 70, 80 million people, whether they'd start in a more rural area that's got 10 million people. What we've noticed across the planet is the military are acting covertly in different countries at different times because they don't have the resources to do it all at the same time. So if we play that forward, that tells me that they can't do it all at the same time, but governments can sign up to a pledge that means that they, in principle, are signing to the new law, but in practice, it will take them some time to get there. I think that's what you'll see.
Thank you. The next 3 questions. Will a new law system be the soil on which the new political, social, and educational systems can grow? Will that be different? Will that be the difference between the new earth and the so-called new world order of the World Economic Forum?
Right, third hardest question of the night. The key is money, and then it's the law. The person who wrote that question does understand that unless the law is, whatever the law is, everything grows from that. So that's quite accurate. but we have to take control of the money, and that's what's happening now, so that things like the law can be rewritten. Because if the bad guys don't have access to money, they can't make the law, they can't control people, they can't blackmail, they can't do all of that. What was the second part of your question? I thought it was more interesting, please.
Yes. Will that be the difference between the New Earth and the so-called New World Order?
Right, the New World Order wanted a great reset. That's what they wanted. They wanted what they called a great reset. And this was a New World Order plan to give money to people, but then to enslave them over and above the way we are now. The whole object for the New World Order was literally to sell it as a good thing, but in reality to literally kill people and make slaves, very obviously, of everybody. So what the good guys did was had to get in quickly before that happened, and both good and bad recognize the key is money. Without money on this planet, you can't do very much. Now, Connecting Consciousness has done a great deal without money, and that is because we've appealed to people's hearts. But what the bad guys in the New World Order, the Great Reset, wanted was a financial reset in terms of appearing to give money to people, but really putting power absolutely 100% in the hands of the bad people. And that's what the European Union is, in my opinion. It's a one world government that controls all nations and takes away their sovereignty. So they wanted that on a wide scale. That's why America was attacked, because if they could stop America, then they could stop every other country. The New World Order, its final plan was a depopulation of humanity, whereas the quantum financial system, which is not a fiat-based system, not the old system, it's a new system, wants to return sovereignty to people where they are valued in a legal structure that is more responsive to the nations than it is to 6 or 7 people in the Vatican. And so it is confusing for many people, because you hear about a reset. If you hear the word reset, then that we would be very, very cautious of that. I'm not looking for a reset. What I'm looking for is a complete revaluation of the world's currencies, backed by precious metals, which mean that there's no more artificial alteration of currencies, that countries are able to trade on a stable rate, not manipulated by, just a handful of people. So we're not going to have a reset, but we're going to have a revaluation. Okay.
Thank you, Simon. May I just ask you, we finished the 2 hours now. Is there one more you would partake?
Yeah, I'll take one more question and I will have to go, because how long have we been going for?
2 hours now.
2 hours, yeah, that'll do me for tonight. One more question.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Simon. It's Uli again. Is full disclosure still part of the strategy of the White Hats?
What do you, on your question, mean by disclosure?
That means that regarding, for example, the German people, they get the truth about what really happened in the past, the truth about the whole history of the world, the truth about physics, mathematics, chemistry, biology, everything.
Yes, but not all at once. I think that the German people will have enough to come to terms with their history, never mind the history of the world. That is a very difficult, unenviable job to have, but it must be done, because where a nation have been lied to as effectively as the Germans have, it needs somebody very effective to be able to undo that. If you don't have full disclosure, then you don't have full truth. Now, I'm not naive enough stupid enough to think that the whole truth about everything is going to come out. It won't. It just won't. But the truth that impacts people on a day-to-day basis must come out. In other words, there are certain things that I know that may never ever come out. But I think that there's enough things that are designed to come out that will change the world forever. And it needs to, because we must never ever go back to the situation that we found ourselves in. So yes, I can't give you 100% disclosure, but I can probably talk about 95%. So 95% disclosure. And people always ask me about flying saucers and aliens. When will the truth about flying saucers and aliens be given? My point here is that the reality is that flying saucers and aliens are less important than Germany understanding how Adolf Hitler was brainwashed into thinking that he was a god, a super god, a demigod, and how everything was placed for him to do what he did. Now that to me is much more important than little green men. The reality that actually Hitler was just an ordinary person who came to Britain, a Tavistock Institute, who suffered from hysterical blindness, was a very, very good hypnotic subject, and as a part Rothschild son, was very open on the genetics. Now that to me is really important, that German people understand that they are not to blame for the war, but a handful of people in Britain and America and Italy who created the whole thing. So yeah, we will have a lot of disclosure, but not all at once. I think that the German people must understand that and accept it and come to terms with it before anything else comes on, because otherwise it'll just be too much. You're the only country in the world who have got to face that. The other countries can probably face other things quicker, but if we get it right for Germany, then we must do it properly, which means we must do it slowly and in order and methodically, which is very German, but I think it's very important, because if we don't get it right, then it'll cause more harm. We're talking about fractures in German consciousness. We're talking about half believing the lies that have been fed to Germans over the last 50 years. And don't ask me that we can undo that in a week. We can challenge it in a week, but it's going to take months, if not years, for people from all generations to actually be happy with themselves. And that's what Germans have got to be, happy with themselves. Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm going to call it a time. It's been 2 hours. And the questions have been excellent. Of course, they're all about Germany. Why wouldn't they be? I'm grateful for you guys to have put them in an order. I found 3 of them to be very in-depth and good. There wasn't a single question that was foolish or silly. People clearly have thought about it, and the members, of course, are very active, and we know that. So I thank all the coordinators here. You have a very important country, and I don't do this for all countries, and I do it for you because I recognize that there's a lot of pain that needs to come out, and I'm here to lead that, to help you, and I look forward to the future. I'm not worried about the future. I went into the supermarket today and I saw the newspapers, and I just thought, this is not my world. This is almost like a separate world. I'm almost like I've got 2 television screens and it's the same film, but somebody has changed the ending on one of the films. And so, you're watching the film here on one side and it's all going down to destruction and blowing up. And on the other side of the film, the same actors, but actually everything is good. And I think that's what the public have been given. They've been given 2 versions, and people must choose which version they believe in. So from Becky as well, thank you very much indeed, and to you and to all our members. Thank you.
Simon, thank you very much. I hope we didn't exhaust you too much with our questions. And there's 1 minute if you have it, because one member used this opportunity not to ask for a question, but to share a letter of gratitude to you. And I would like to read it out. It might energize you and lean back and just enjoy. So thank you, Simon, so very much for this precious and very insightful Q&A with you. We are so grateful for the opportunity to be with you here. Thank you for all the information and insights you shared with us today. Thank you 1 million times for your ongoing CC meetings and updates online and all other support you give to so many people. We are so grateful for your kindness and your big heart that are always shining through, calming our worries and inspiring us to stay connected with our heart while navigating through these times. We are so happy to have been guided to become part of Connecting Consciousness. Thank you so much. Bless you. We love you, Simon. And for me, thank you very much, Simon. Be blessed, feel hugged, and hope to see you soon.
Very good. Well, you know, when all these stupid rules are changed, of course, we will fly to Germany. I can't promise to go to every city, but certainly there'll be a couple of cities in Germany that we will definitely be going to. Thank you. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.